war, most were hoping they would never be needed in battle again. But a few realized their potential and continued to push their development. The Mark C. Hornet was a medium tank design. Based on the Whippet, it did not make it into production till the end of the war. The infantry had plans to acquire their own tanks. There were two competing designs, the medium Mark D and the Vickers light tank. The Vickers, similar to the previous Marks, had many improvements: a revolving turret, suspension, and the engine in a separate compartment from the crew. Designated the A2E1, its advanced transmission was unreliable and the design was abandoned. Britain had been the developer and originator of the battle tank, but lost the edge after the war. They did continue to develop armoured vehicle designs for cavalry and infantry support. In 1934, the A9 or cruiser tank was developed. Intended to foray deep behind enemy lines, its main advantage was speed. 125 were put into production with various manufacturers. It could attain speeds up to 40 kilometers per hour. Its chassis would go on to be the basis for the more heavily armoured Valentine model. Developed for the Army and introduced during the Second World War, the Crusader was a cruiser tank with 5 road wheels for better weight distribution. It was a fast tank, but suffered from the lack of heavy armament. Its 2-pounder gun was very limited in range and penetration. The French developed the Char B1 as their main battle tank. It had a crew of 4 and very effective armour. It had a range of 200 kilometers and a top road speed of 28 kilometers per hour. It served the French forces with some effect until overrun by German forces. In 1922, the Russians, looking for new tank technology, turned to the Germans for assistance. They traded secret facilities for German know-how. By 1927, at Kazan, a tank training school was opened. There, new tank designs and tactics were studied in great depth. American manufacturers took the British tank design and produced the Mark 8. Armed with 2 6-pounder cannons and 30 caliber machine gun, it had a crew of 11, a range of 50 miles at 6.5 miles an hour. They also took the French Renault FT-17 design and produced their own. The first all-American design tank was the Ford 3-ton M1918, a 2-man vehicle with a top speed of 8 miles per hour. 15 were built and 1 sent to France for evaluations. The war ended before it could go into mass production. They explored other designs in 1922, and through that decade the T2 and T4 models. For various reasons, none went into production. The T-28 was classed as a super heavy tank destroyer weighing in at 95 tons. Only 2 were built. In 1928, a maverick tank designer, J. Walter Christie, put forward a chassis design that would allow a 9-ton tank to travel at speeds up to 30 miles per hour. His design was utilized in most of the succeeding tank models until 1944. It was the Second World War that quickly became the Tank War. Mechanized infantry, fast-moving artillery and aircraft all contributed to a fast, mobile and brutal war. The tank was in the forefront of strategic and tactical thinking on every battlefield. The German doctrine on the use of tanks was well developed. Their attention to armor protection and firepower was superior to most other tanks. However, it came at the expense of speed and reliability. Tank production suffered. For example, in 1943, the US built nearly 30,000 tanks, Britain built 7,476, but Germany, with the increase in materials and precision construction, could only output nearly 6,000. The Soviet Union constructed an estimated 20,000 per year. Developed during the 30s, the Panzer III was introduced to battle at the beginning of World War II. It was upgraded to 30mm hardened steel plate and gained a second 30mm plate front and rear. The model was withdrawn from main service and redesignated to a support role, placing the Panzer IV as main battle medium tank. Designed originally as an infantry support tank, it took on the main anti-armour role as the Panzer III was pulled from that service. Over 8,800 were produced and exported to other countries. The British had continued developing their tank designs. The Matilda was one. Nearly 3,000 were produced, the A11 model only armed with machine guns. The later model A12 sported a quick-fire 2-pounder tank gun. Introduced in 1937, it saw service through the war. The Valentine utilized design elements of the A10 tank's suspension and transmission, but was lighter armored than the Matilda, but matched it for speed. Initially considered too small and cramped, it was eventually accepted after the British Expeditionary Force was evacuated from Dunkirk with the loss of all their equipment. It was a successful infantry support weapon in desert warfare. It was also utilized by the Red Army as a light tank. The Churchill was known for its effective armour and good off-road capability, and its chassis was the basis for many variant and specialist vehicles. It was, however, undergunned with a 2-pounder cannon. Attempts to improve this with a 3-inch howitzer did not fare too well. It was almost shelved, but an improved version, the Mark III, went into battle in North Africa and proved its capability to survive numerous direct hits from German guns. The Mark III also fielded a 6-pounder gun on an improved turret design and is credited with knocking out a Tiger tank. The Mark VI version of the Churchill sported the even larger 75mm gun and saw action from Normandy through to the end of the war. The Cromwell was a cruiser tank based on the Crusader and replaced the American Sherman tank in some quarters and was the fastest of all British tank designs. It was improved over time with a new power plant. The Comet I A34 was an advance on this design and incorporated an improved cannon. The Comet went into action in the final months of the war. The British also took on American tanks like the Stuart, the Grant, and the Sherman. Crewed by 7 men, this tank was armed with a 74mm cannon mounted on a non-rotating turret. Although fast, it was no match for German guns and armour. It was also used by the British in the North African campaign. A very versatile tank, it was mass-produced by Chrysler and constituted 65% of the tanks produced during the war. Developed from the M3, it had a rotating turret with a 75mm cannon. By war's end, there were 18 models or variants in action. It saw service in every theatre of the war. The Soviets built their T-26 model on the British Vickers 6-tonner in the 1930s, and it was considered a most successful design. Over 12,000 units were produced, and it constituted a majority of the Red Army's tank forces until 1941. It saw extensive service in the Spanish Civil War. Although its performance during the Second World War was not very good, it did play a major role in the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in 1939. The Soviets developed the cruiser tank, the BT, early enough to see service in the Spanish Civil War and the Winter War with Finland. Utilizing the Christie suspension system, they were lightly armored that carried a 45mm tank gun